Boston. Psychology, The Cognitive Powers by James McCosh. Book first. The Simple Cognitive or Presentative Powers. Sense Perception. Part 3. Section 9. Touch Proper, or Feeling. In it, we have sensation and perception more intimately connected than any other sense. The sensation arises from the sensor nerves, proceeding from every part of the periphery of the body to the sensorium in the brain. The organ is the skin, and touch is often called the skin sense by the Germans. The skin consists of 2 layers, the outer or cuticle, which is meant for protection and is insensible, and the true skin, with its sensitive points called pupillae, lying under. Remove the epithelium, and the sense of touch and that of temperature are lost. The most sensitive parts of the body are the tips of the tongue, of the fingers, and the lips. This is probably because of the nerves generated at these points by use. The sensibility may be created from within, but is commonly awakened by pressure from without, which affects the papillae and associated nerves. We are led naturally, the nature may have been acquired by heredity, to refer the action to the point at which the sensor nerve terminates. If we prick a nerve which reaches the mid-finger, the pain is felt there. If we stretch or pinch the ulnar nerve by pushing it from side to side or compressing with the fingers, the shock is felt in the part to which its ultimate branchlets are distributed, namely in the palm and back of the hand and in the 4th and 5th fingers. According as the pressure is varied, the pricking sensation is felt by turns in the 4th finger, in the 5th, in the palm of the hand or back of the hand, and both on the palm and on the back of the hand the situation of the pricking sensation is different according as the pressure on the nerve is varied. That is to say, according as different fibers or fasciculi of fibers are more pressed upon than others. The same will be found to be the case in irritating the nerve of the upper arm. Müller's Physiology, by Bailey, page 740. So strong is this tendency to localize the sensation at the extremity of the nerves that when an arm or leg is amputated, the person has still the feeling of the lost limb. Müller has collected a number of such cases. A student named Schmitz had his arm amputated above the elbow 13 years ago. He has never ceased to have sensations as if in the fingers. I applied pressure to the nerves in the stump, and M. Schmitz immediately felt the whole arm, even the fingers, as if asleep. A toll-keeper in the neighborhood of Hall, whose right arm had been shattered by a cannonball in battle above the elbow 20 years ago, and afterwards amputated, has still, in 1833, at the time of changes of the weather, distinct rheumatic pains, which seem to him to exist in the whole arm. And though removed long ago, the lost part is at those times felt as if sensible to draughts of air. This man also completely confirmed our statement that the sense of the integrity of the limb was never lost. When there is a change made artificially in the peripheral extremities of nerves, the sensations are felt as if in the original spots. When in the restoration of a nose a flap of skin is turned down from the forehead and made to unite with the stump of the nose, the new nose thus formed has, as long as the isthmus of skin by which it maintains its original nerve supply remains undivided, the same sensations as if it were still on the forehead. In other words, when the nose is touched, the patient feels the impression in the forehead. This is a fact well known to surgeons, and was first observed by Lisfranc. Whatever it may have been originally, all this is now natural. very probably handed down by heredity. Professor Valentin, Repet für Anatomie und Physiologie, 1836, page 330, has observed that individuals who are the subjects of congenital imperfection or absence of the extremities have, nevertheless, the internal sensations of such limbs in their perfect state. A girl aged 19 years, in whom the metacarpal bones of the left hand were very short and all the bones of the phalanges absent, a row of imperfectly organized, wart-like projections representing the fingers, assured M. Valentin that she had constantly the internal sensation of a palm of the hand, and 5 fingers on the left side, as perfect as on the right. When a ligature was placed round the stump, she had the sensation of formication in the hand and fingers, and pressure on the ulnar nerve gave rise to the ordinary feeling of the 3rd, 4th, and 5th fingers being asleep, although these fingers did not exist. The examination of 3 other individuals gave the same results. Ibid, page 747. By the simultaneous sensations, we have a perception of plurality of points, and we feel our bodily frame, as it were, round about us. Müller maintains that in this way we get a knowledge of the greater number of the parts of the body, and in all the dimensions of space, and that when our body comes into collision with another body, if the shock be sufficiently strong, the sensation of our body to a certain depth is awakened, and there arises a sensation of the contusion in the whole dimensions of the cube. If this be true, then this sense gives us a knowledge of our body as extended in 3 dimensions. The primitive knowledge given by this sense seems, as in the case of taste, smell, and hearing, to be intra-organic, though of course extra-mental. But by experience we come to know that there are extra-organic bodies affecting us, and the cause of the sensations, and may thus come with the aid of the muscular sense to be cognizant of the hardness and softness, roughness and smoothness of the bodies touching us. It seems now to be ascertained that temperature is an affection of the tactile nerves. It is felt as a sensation of our bodily organs. The extra-organic cause is determined by experience and reasoning upon it. Section 10. The muscular sense. This is intimately connected with touch proper, but differs from it essentially. The organic apparatus consists first of a motor nerve, proceeding from the lower part of the brain to a muscle. We will move an organ, say the arm, and the motor nerve carries the action to the muscle. This part of the process has been called the locomotive energy. We know that the muscle has been moved and resistance offered by a sensor nerve attached and carrying the intimation to the brain. In this sense, as in every other, there is sensation, but perception is vastly predominant. By the senses which have come before us hitherto, we seem merely to know our frame with its parts out of each other. By this sense, we know objects out of and beyond our body, and as resisting our energy. The senses already noticed have given us linear direction, probably also surface, plane, or perhaps curved. They have certainly given us points of space as separated. This gives us bodies in 3 dimensions. We press on a solid body and along its surface, and along its sides, and around it, and thus get the idea of solidity or impenetrability. The muscular sense, including in it the volition and the resistance, first gives us the idea of power, potency, energy, or force, out of which proceeds our idea and conviction as to causation. While feeling and muscular sense are different, the one being intra-organic and the other extra-organic, yet they commonly act at the same time and together. They unite to give us the sense of pressure which arises from the feeling of force with which a body presses on our nerves of feeling and is resisted by muscular action. A body is laid on our skin, and we estimate its weight by the amount of force which we use in order to lift it. By practice, people may become very expert in weighing objects. Those who have to mix materials in definite proportions can often do so without the use of a machine, and the officers in a post office can tell the weight of a letter by simply placing it on their hand. Section 11. Vision. This is in many respects the highest and most intellectual of all the senses. It is also the most complicated. I am not sure that all its mysteries have yet been cleared up. Much, however, is known. We have to contemplate it simply as giving us a perception. The ball of the eye is a globe moving freely in a chamber, the orbit. It has a firm, tough, spheroidal case, the greater part of which is white and opaque, called the sclerotic. In front is what is called the cornea, which is transparent. Light enters by the cornea and thence passes into the aqueous humor, consisting mainly of water. It then passes through the gateway of the iris into the denser crystalline lens, where it is refracted according to the shape and consistency of the lens. It now passes through the vitreous humor, which is a sort of jelly, to the retina, where it forms an inverted image of the object from which it has come. On the retina, it impacts on rods and cones, which are connected with the optic nerve. The estimated number of cones in the human eye is 3,360,000. The number of rods is not known. The rods have a pigment which is bleached by light and restored in darkness. We do not know the full functions of these rods and cones. They seem, however, to be connected with the formation of the figure, certainly of the color. There is no vision at the point where the light falls on the optic nerve, and it is called the blind spot, which has no cones or rods. Vision is most acute at a yellow spot which is full of close-set cones. Distinctness of vision requires that objects shall be so far apart that their images on the retina shall reach more than one cone. The luminous action remains not only during the time the light is shining, but an appreciable time after. The retina in some persons seems to be affected in the same way by various colors. This gives rise to color blindness, so that the person cannot distinguish between the green leaves of a tree and its red fruit. There are large muscles, straight and oblique, which keep the eye in its place and direct its axis, so that we can carefully gaze on and inspect the object. Were the eyeball fixed, our knowledge by the eye would be very imperfect. Motion in this sense greatly helps us in our perception of objects. Intuitively, we perceive by the eye a colored surface, and I believe nothing more. This surface is felt as affecting us, but by a gathered experience and reasoning upon it, we can extend our knowledge indefinitely. It had been surmised by several persons before, as by Locke, but was established by Bishop Berkeley, the Irish metaphysician, in the New Theory of Vision, 1709, that originally we have no knowledge of linear distance by the eyes. On looking forward, we have simply a perception of a colored surface affecting us, at what distance we cannot tell. This theory has since been confirmed by the observation of the cases of persons born blind, but whose eyes were subsequently couched so that they could see. I shall mention 3 of these cases. Cheselden case. The boy was between 13 and 14 years of age when his eye was couched by Dr. Cheselden. See Transactions of Royal Society, 1727. When he first saw, he was so far from making any judgment about distances that he thought all objects whatever touched his eyes, as he expressed it, as what he felt did his skin, and thought no objects so agreeable as those which were smooth and regular, though he could form no judgment of their shape or guess what it was in any object that was pleasing to him. He knew not the shape of anything, nor any one thing from another, however different in shape or magnitude, but being told what things were, whose form he before knew from feeling, he would carefully observe that he might know them again. But having too many objects to learn at once, he forgot many of them, and, as he said, at first learned to know and again forget 1,000 things in a day. One particular only, though it may appear trifling, I will relate. Having often forgot which was the cat and which was the dog, he was ashamed to ask, but catching the cat, which he knew by feeling, he was observed to look at her steadfastly, and then putting her down, said, "Puss, so I shall know you another time." We thought he soon knew what pictures represented which were shown him, but we found afterwards we were mistaken, for about every 2 months after he was couched, he discovered at once they represented solid bodies, when to that time he considered them only as party-colored planes or surfaces, diversified with variety of paints. But even then he was no less surprised, expecting the pictures would feel like the things they represented, and was amazed when he found those parts which by their light and shadow appeared now round, and even felt flat like the rest, and asked which was the lying sense, feeling or seeing. Fran's case. Philosophical Transactions of Royal Society, 1841. The youth had been born blind, and was 17 years of age, when his eye was couched by Dr. Franz of Leipzig. When the eye was sufficiently restored to bear the light, a sheet of paper on which 2 strong black lines had been drawn, the one horizontal, the other vertical, was placed before him at the distance of about 3 feet. He was now allowed to open the eye, and after attentive examination, he called the lines by their right denominations. The outline in black of a square 6 inches in diameter, within which a circle had been drawn, and within the latter a triangle, was, after careful examination, recognized and correctly described by him. At the distance of 3 feet, and on a level with the eye, a solid cube and a sphere, each of 4 inches in diameter, were placed before him. After attentively examining these bodies, he said he saw a quadrangular and a circular figure, and after some consideration, he pronounced the one a square and the other a disc. His eye being then closed, the cube was taken away, and a disc of equal size substituted and placed next to the sphere. On again opening his eye, he observed no difference in these objects, but regarded them both as discs. The solid cube was now placed in a somewhat oblique position before the eye, and close beside it a figure cut out of pasteboard, representing a plain outline prospect of the cube when in this position. Both objects he took to be something like flat quadrates. A pyramid placed before him with one of its sides towards his eye he saw as a plain triangle. This object was now turned a little so as to present 2 of its sides to view. but rather more of one side than of the other. After considering and examining it for a long time, he said that this was a very extraordinary figure. It was neither a triangle, nor a quadrangle, nor a circle. He had no idea of it, and could not describe it. In fact, he said, I must give it up. On the conclusion of these experiments, I asked him to describe the sensations the objects had produced, whereupon he said that immediately on opening his eye, he had discovered a difference in the two objects, the cube and the sphere placed before him, and perceived that they were not drawings, but that he had not been able to form from them the idea of a square and a disc until he perceived a sensation of what he saw in the points of his fingers, as if he really touched the objects. When I gave the three bodies, the sphere, cube, and pyramid, into his hand, he was much surprised that he had not recognized them as such by sight, as he was well acquainted with mathematical figures by his touch. When the patient first acquired the faculty of sight, all objects appeared to him so near that he was sometimes afraid of coming in contact with them, though they were in reality at a great distance from him. All objects appeared to him perfectly flat. Thus, although he very well knew by his touch that his nose was prominent and the eye sunk deeper in the head, he saw the human face only as a plane. These observations show that the eye takes in surface and superficial figure at once, but cannot discern solidity. If the persons have the use of both eyes, they will observe the difference between a disc and a solid, but they would not be able to say till they feel it that the latter is a solid. It requires to be added that those who have their sight thus given them require observation and thought to reconcile the information they had got from touch with that which they are now receiving from sight. Just as people who have learned two languages, say German and French, require practice in order to enable them readily to translate the one into the other. Another portion of this report is worthy of being recorded, as showing how the memory and the fancy depend on the senses. Though he possessed an excellent memory, this faculty was at first quite deficient as regarded visible objects. He was not able, for example, to recognize visitors until he heard them speak, till he had seen them very frequently. Even when he had seen the object repeatedly, he could form no idea of visible qualities in his imagination without having the real object before him. Heretofore, when he dreamed of any persons, of his parents, for instance, he felt them and heard their voices, but never saw them. But now, after having seen them, frequently he also saw them in his dreams. Trinchinetti case. Mr. Abbott, in Sight and Touch, gives an account of the observations of Trinchinetti. He operated at the same time on two patients, brother and sister, 11 and 10 years old, respectively. The same day, having caused the boy to examine an orange, he placed it about 1 meter away from him and bade him try to take it. The boy brought his hand close to his eye, and closing his fist found it empty, to his great surprise. He then tried again a few inches from his eye, and at last, in this tentative way, succeeded in taking the orange. When the same experiment was tried with the girl, she also at first attempted to grasp the orange with her hand very near the eye, then, perceiving her error, stretched out her forefinger and pushed it in a straight line slowly until she reached her object. Trinchinetti regards these observations as indicating that visible objects were in actual contact with the eye. Other patients have been observed, by Janin and Duval, to move their hands in search of objects in straight lines from the eye. But while the perception of distance is not an original endowment of sight, it can be acquired. It should be noticed that in this acquisition we are much aided by the circumstance that while we do not by the eye perceive distance from us, we see a flat surface with a distance between the sides. End of section 5.